For those that had a St. Patty's Day yesterday, I hope you had a great one. Welcome all, and thanks for joining us as always each week. If you're new, there's a certain cadence we do. That is, we start off with good stuff, wins of the week. And sometimes we have win backs of the week. That is a segment where if you could do it over, right? Or I'd like to share this. Did anybody ever experience this? The good news of something like a win back is it helps you and articulate what you might have done differently. It might help somebody else in the future or yourself when they get into that situation. So win backs are always welcome and always appreciated. Then we're going to get into our special guest segment. We're going to be talking about third-party risk management. And then we'll conclude with Mr. Falk with doing a walkthrough of that platform. Erin said she's got some goodies. So let's kick things off here. My name's Andrew Morgan. I've had the pleasure to do this with Erin, Tim, and Kristen and the Cynomi folks. And let's kick it off. So, who's got a win they want to share? It could be small, it could be big, it could be business related. It could be something, observable that you're like, gosh, I really want to share this. This was impactful. Anybody want to go out on a limb? And Aaron, if nobody wants to, while they're getting the gumption up to do it, I'm going to share a win if that's okay with you, to get the
Go
team,
for it.
to get everybody going. So we launched the first certified cybersecurity leadership strategist course, an accredited course by the University of South Florida, taught by Brian Blakely, who's been on this before, a 3-day workshop. We had our first 12 cohort. We did it in 3 weeks because we just got the accreditation in a short order. But we've gotten feedback by folks at companies like Summit 7 and others that it was one of the most, if not the most impactful course and accreditation they've ever taken. So kudos to Brian Blakely and his mad skills. The other thing is we got to see Jen Easterly's keynote at Cyber Bay, which was really awesome. So that's my win. Tim,
Nice.
you were on site as well doing fun stuff in the Clearwater, St. Pete area, I think. And you got any good stuff from your vantage point?
Yeah, like I really like some of these events that are being put together now. Someone that does events professionally, I really like the people that are doing the events where they're hosting the events in. Like, I think it's really great. So I was over at Clearwater. Ricky joined me for a day. Um, the Secure IT Summit. It's held by CyberFox, and it's really just kind of a good. Here's 100 people focused on security, having conversations about where the next thing's going. So I think it was really good. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But yeah, no, I mean it was great to see a group of people to get together because as you know, right now you've secured your silo as the security event in the space. Well deserved as well, with some of the other ones dropping off. But it's just nice to start seeing people be more active in these security communities and understanding that they actually need to take it as a real piece of what they're doing for the future of their partners.
For sure. For sure. All right. Anybody out there want to share anything? Come on, there's got to be one brave soul to,
John, I see
be
Lee,
Who?
Roy. Come on, guys.
I mean, I
Come on.
got two M Flemings on here, so one of them's got to have something good to say, right? It's like I've got
Roy
one in each
came
one of
off
my
mute.
glasses here.
Go, Roy. Go. I saw you.
Yeah.
I want to know if Cynomi does. My understanding is that Cynomi can provide a less than total solution. Don't know what you'd call it, but it would be something that doesn't provide everything,
Mhm.
but a subset at a much lower price. For
Mhm.
example, I deal with accounting and bookkeeping companies. There are in Ontario over 2,000. That's in Ontario alone. A lot of them are sole proprietors. They can't afford the whole enchilada, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is there reduced capability to give them a break, basically, and to help them uh, support them at least in their efforts to reduce their cyber risk.
Yeah. No, thank you, Roy. That is a phenomenal question. So we actually do have two license levels within Cynomi. There is something called Cynomi Pro, which is what most, if you're an existing partner on this call, you're familiar with. It's kind of the full gamut of capability, of compliance, of assessment, policy development, the roadmap, all of it. The risk management, BIA, BCP, you get it. There is something that we have been trialing over the last quarter, and we call it Cynomi Core. This is security foundations. This is essentials. This is kind of that angle of us being able to help you as our partner take security to all of your customers at a much more affordable rate, both on the license side and then from the value of your service on top of it. So the easy answer in my win of the week is a yes. It hasn't been fully launched, so you're hearing it here first. But we have enough partners that are in beta with this and using it that I feel very comfortable sharing with this community. And then you'll see us announcing in full by the end of April and communicating this out. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks. See, look, you got the tea here, Andrew. It's piping hot on the community call this week.
That's right. That's right. All right. Others, any wins or win backs that you'd like to share?
I saw Tim jump in there and said he would. Not
All
Tim,
right.
not our Tim, other Tim, Tim Thompson.
Tim Thompson, let's do it.
Long pause. Oh, I think he's got to get promoted if he's going to do it.
There he is. You jump to the top of my list on the normal alphabetical category. Like you're testing my limits about Oklahoma education.
Uh-oh.
He's been promoted.
All right. Come on down, Tim.
There he is.
I got you guys.
All right. Good to see you.
Good.
You're the next contestant on Win Back of the Week.
Yeah, you know what? I got a couple things going on here. They're just small, but I've been constantly working with MSPs and talking about you guys about the great work that you're doing in the MSP community to help to grow and scale the cybersecurity compliance solutions and services. There's a gentleman on here, I just saw him, that we're out of Ottawa that's joined a really great MSP that's evaluating the platform. So I think that's a great opportunity for him to be here. And I'm excited about this particular call because it leads into the Millionaire Mastermind that I'm speaking at next week in San Diego in front of 45 MSPs around AI readiness and compliance using cybersecurity solutions. And I'm leading with Cynomi. So I'm excited to report back to you in 2 weeks on how that goes. But I thought I would share that tidbit of information.
Nice.
Really appreciate it. And best of success on your presentation.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, let's jump in, Andrew. Why don't we do a little intro of Greg and jump right into it?
Fantastic. Absolutely. Well, first, Greg, welcome back. For those that maybe not had a chance to meet or hear Greg, you're in for a treat. Arguably, when I look at third-party risk management, there's really one person I always go to. It's Greg, author, and somebody that has been doing this for a long time at many levels. This is, it's one thing when people are giving advice. It's another when they've lived it and built large-scale programs. So, Greg, welcome back. And tell us a little about yourself before you're done telling about, and we launch into your fireside chat on third-party risk management. give us an update on how the AI book is going. Real snippet, but
Yeah,
let's
sure.
kick
Yeah.
it off. Let's kick it off with you.
So I can thank you. So I can say that I have written the first trilogy in cybersecurity. So I won't get Peter Jackson interested anytime soon, but we have the first cybersecurity and third-party risk book, which is kind of what I think started a conversation with you and me years ago. And that's a couple of years old now. It's not that old, but it's I think 4 or 5 years old now. And in between there, I wrote a book called Zero Trust in third-party risk. So taking really that resiliency play that Zero Trust does and applying it and overlay to third-party risk. And now you mentioned it. Thank you for the AI and third-party risk. So I'm not really inventive on book names. Unfortunately, I realize that everyone just includes the subject of the matter and then third-party risk afterwards. So that's kind of funny. But AI and third-party risk, it actually should be out at the end of this month.
Okay.
Or early April at the latest. So I have mine on pre-order already on Amazon. Just that's my way of indicating. I'll get a bunch from the publisher, but you can pre-order on Amazon, and it would probably be on your doorstep probably fairly soon. I run a consulting business called Third Party Threat Hunting, and that's primary. Kind of what I do day to day is work with with companies to help them either build or rebuild their third party risk programs. And then I also work on content apart from as you said, try and do it on multiple levels. So I actually work on training that I've developed with Third Party Risk Association. One's called a Third Party Cyber Risk Assessor. It's actually a certification-based program. You can take the certification at Pearson VUE, and it's a 2-day course on really how to be an excellent cyber assessor and third-party risk. And then I have a 4-hour certificate-based course, which is what I was struggling with earlier, on securing SaaS applications. And so again, the cloud issues around how you do with vendors who are in the cloud, and most of our vendors are in the cloud, really confuzzles a lot of third-party practitioners. And what I try and do is really kind of take away the black box of it and make people see what your vendor's seeing. And then I'm actually going to take the book and parlay that into a 4-hour course as well with TPRM on AI and third-party risks. Figure out, give people some hands-on. All my training, like my books, is designed to really provide practical guidance to practitioners. It's not. I really don't like books that just say, "Here's how you're supposed to go do it. Now have fun." I always try and provide really hands-on ways to do things because I think it's the way I learn better, and I think it helps a lot of practitioners that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You need different modalities. People learn differently, and
Exactly.
I agree with you. You need, actual reps under you, whether it's, role playing, which we did a ton of this past week. So good for you,
Good, thanks.
Greg. Let's get on into it. Interesting last few weeks geopolitically, right? To say the least. There has been, AWS data centers with drones flying into them and taking, entire regions offline. And then we had the Stryker medical incident shortly thereafter, Greg. Our Stryker was also a glaringly obvious incident of supply chain risk. I mean, there was reasons that, I think it was Hendel. I forget exactly the name of the threat actor, but they really indicated, hey, this is why, not only why we're doing it, but we know that there's vast reaching, pieces of third-party risk here, both to the military and medical. So when this all started to go down, again, I thought right of you, like in terms of this is, I guess, two things. One, did your phone start ringing off the hook? What were your thoughts on this and seeing third-party risk play out as you kind of witnessed this?
Yeah, so my phone didn't ring off the hook, although I do have a little bit more interest. As these kind of events like SolarWinds and Colonial Pipeline years ago do sort of spark interest. Oh, wow. Oh, that's a third part. Oh, I know I'm supposed to do something about that. And so you tend to get an interest, right, when the news hits up. But when I have a conversation with these folks, when I do an initial phone call, it's really a discussion about resiliency, right? Whether it's a drone attack or we could talk about, the DNS outage that happened with AWS and caused, a sheer panic and not just on the East Coast, but pretty much worldwide. I know it was panic because my kids ran in and said they couldn't play their Xbox and PS5 suddenly, and I knew the world was ending. But all kidding aside, I mean, we had major outages because of one data center on one platform in one location, and yet worldwide impact to it, right? So the question I had when I actually had a customer who was impacted by that, and I said, you know what? So you obviously, it was a bit of a rhetorical question, but you obviously tested your failover prior to this on your annual backup tests where was your backup? Oh, it was US West. That's a great answer, right? You tested that, of course, right? And I knew the answer was no because they failed. They failed when US East went down, they failed and it was a hard crash. So if you don't test it, it won't work, right? If you just talk about it, yeah, we have a backup, which is what they did. We have a backup, and they always pointed to that backup. But the fact is, they never actually tested. Will it actually fail over when it fails? Not the if, but when it fails. And if you have critical systems on AWS, and most of us do nowadays, or Azure, you name the CSP of your choice, you're going to have to figure out that resiliency issue, test it and retest it, and if it's on a vendor and it's a critical vendor, hey, ask that vendor, can we do a tabletop this year? Right? Let's walk through how we would do this together because you're a critical vendor for me. I want to make sure that we are both successful when this happens, right? Not if, but when this happens.
Yeah, great points. And, I'm just curious, you all out there, you can throw it in the chat. How many of you feel provide your customers are doing true continuity testing, like literally fail it over to mission critical, which kind of leads me into the next question, because third-party risk management, Greg, has been around, especially if you're in regulated, and I remember you had just finished up your days at Truist, which is a pretty darn big, after you get out of the banks too big to fail, get into, almost too big to fail, like size of Truist. So you've got a lot of reps, and this is a formal practice. But when we think about, the world this community lives, and the mid-market, SMB and mid-market,
Sure.
A lot of times, even with regulated, it's a checkbox. Yeah, here's the questionnaire, vendor fills it out, everybody feels good. Let's bring it down to real world, because if you were advising an MSP here, vCISO, MSSP, how do you look at, like, what's the right questions to ask around critical services and suppliers, like you and I were talking, if the spigot goes off, what happens to, and how do you clarify, what's critical?
Yeah, so I think a lot of these of course, these behaviors are driven by regulators, right? And the OCC, you mentioned, financial, OCC was the first to really promulgate, if not the first, promulgate rules around third-party risk and requirement. Now, that's the OCC. Big two failed big banks, right? FDIC and others followed quickly after. And you have a lot of regulators that now require overseas as well in the EU space, right? You got international regulations around third-party risk and the behaviors to do that. The problem we have, and you touch on this, is that compliance does not equal cybersecurity, and every company that's ever been breached has been compliant the day before, right? So all that stuff being put aside, what you really want to focus on is what are your systemically critical vendors? These are the vendors that you can't live without, or your customers' vendors, right? And you too as an MSP, right? Yourself, right? Because this is a good hygiene for your own vendor ecosystem, right? What are your most vendors that if they can't run or they're in a lowered state of operation, they will impact your ability to operate as well? All right. That list shouldn't be, it could be long, but it shouldn't be hundreds, right? If it's hundreds, you've defined it incorrectly, probably is the issue. So get that list, figure out what those are that you can't live without, and then start a risk-based list of those. Always look at your risk from third parties like you would for your first party in a risk-based order. Not every risk is created the same. Not every vendor is created the same. Okay. And then I would also look at doing physical validation. And the reason why is because to your point, the questionnaires are a checkbox, okay? And it's a phone it in answer, okay? And often vendors make their best efforts to answer it correctly. Some make a really bad effort at answering it correctly. Either way, it's dated the moment it goes out your door. How many of us, those things are filled out once a year. How many of our enterprises stay static for a year? For a week? None of them. So the fact that you're relying on an answer that as a questionnaire that they did 6 months ago or a year ago you're sort of, okay, it's okay. I'll hold my beer moment to some extent, right? To again use a euphemism. A physical validation is the difference between asking your kid is the room clean and going to your kid's room and checking it's clean yourself. So when you go to physical validation, you don't have to do this physically, and you can do them in person. That's great. But if your vendor has most of their stuff on a CSP, you're not going to be able to do a physical check of the CSP anyways. So do it virtually like this with the collab tools. Hey, do you have a policy that governs your identity access management? Hopefully the answer is yes. You look at the policy. You look at have they touched it recently as they're supposed to, and then do the policies make sense? And then kind of just say, hey, I notice your password complexity says you have to do these things. Show me a proof of that in production. Usually it's a screenshot of the group policy and AD and Active Directory. And Bob's your uncle, you're fine. If it's somewhere out of whack, that's when you start to say, okay, you say your password complexity is supposed to be this, but in production I see it's that. Why the disconnect? And you can start to have conversations about those differences or gaps, right? Physical validation, I think, really provides you with your critical vendors, that conversation you want to have to build a relationship up, right? Because they're critical for a reason to you. And you want to have that relationship. So when things do go sideways, again, not the if, but when things do go sideways, you have that relationship, that trust that says, hey, I'm not here to ding you. I want us both to be successful. What's going on, right? I see you're having an outage maybe. What's going on with it, right? Sorry, I'm trying to wrap up my answer so it doesn't drag on too much.
That's okay, but it's interesting. I'm going to go to Tim in a second, but as I hear you, and you say, looking at your critical vendors that you really can't do business without, the ones that are the choke points for your revenue and your supply chain and your critical contractual obligations. Greg, there's a lot of kind of crossover between that and a business impact assessment, like what's critical. One of the things we talked about this past week that Brian Blakely said, he's like, look, this is pretty easy. He goes, if someone says they can operate a system, be out without a system for 5 days or more, it's not critical, right?
Yeah.
Those are ones you can just literally cross right off. But because
again, I think the definitions of how you define what's systemically critical to you really will depend on your industry and how you define that. But however you define it, it needs to be at a cutoff point that you get a manageable list that you feel, like you said, I would view systemically critical in finance, SWIFT, right? The Fed. There's a few big vendors in that space that I won't mention that most companies just have to skate to because they're the only ones that make software in that space of any value, right? So those are the type of vendors. If you're a manufacturer, it's the power company, right? That kind of stuff. Those are easy ones to sort of check off your list.
If you're healthcare, it's EMR. I mean, we're probably seeing that firsthand right now.
The Stryker folks, right?
Stryker. So, Tim.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. Tim, let's bring it down to the level of MSPs that may or may not be on this call that you saw this past week. You did a kind of an enablement and thought leadership on third-party risk management and at the CyberFox event. What's the heartbeat that you felt there, and what's good, what surprised you maybe, what was good, what guy talk to us about that.
Yeah, I can even go further back than that. I mean, it's just because we talked several times. My background was in banking, like SOC 2 and TPRM. Those are kind of normal things. The words may have changed over the years, but that's it. But it still continues as part of the conversation. Like I talk specifically about TPRM and like this is the next big thing that you need to be looking at and how to start addressing that. And I'm getting a lot of kind of blank stares and what do you mean I'm responsible for somebody else's security? And it's just these conversations where it's like, look, it's kind of like when regulations come down, right? Because HIPAA came down and for the longest time it didn't have any teeth, so nobody cared about it, right? And then it got teeth and all of a sudden everybody cared about it. TPRM is, and one of the things I think is, as practitioners for the MSPs, if you're looking at those auditors and what those auditors are dinging you on, they're really showing you the way that industry is progressing. So it's one of those things where TPRM is coming in and it's getting pushed down. And if we're not open to that and saying, okay, how do we put this in? And the thing is too, is like a lot of people just don't know how to monetize it. Like, what's the business need? How do I sell it? How do I go to market? These kind of things. And it's overcoming those first pieces of it. But the fact that it's still just kind of this unknown 4 letters that really nobody really knows what the words are behind the letters is just really surprising, as much security as we've seen out of the last few years.
Yeah, good. What came right to mind, Tim, as you were saying this is, I've never met, again, I'm going to quote Brian Blakely. I never met an unregulated client. And it's such a great quote, because what's going to get businesses to actually listen is when we start to talk about revenue, and things like TPRM can be the CRO's greatest friend. I mean, if you think about, I don't know, Aaron, if I could just kind of pick on you, if you guys have a big, let's just say Cynomi has a big deal in the pipeline for a minute, upstream, whether it's a large scale MSP, or you guys announced that huge deal with, I forget the big telco over in Europe. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are getting a security questionnaire, and it's not just about your security, it's about your security policies and how you vet your vendors. Am I close?
Every time.
Every time. So if we're going into the C-suite, call it small, medium business, and they're like, oh, well, they're not regulated, they're not going to care. Let's look at where their large scale contracts and potential deals come from, and make the CRO your friend. That person has a vested interest, because I can't tell you how many deals in my years of selling software, and it was always in this space, but big, large scale deals that you would get either somebody in security or the capital allocation committee, right, Greg? Capital allocation is one of the, you don't think they're going to come in a large scale deal and start to, look. So bring people in early and often. They can be your best friend, especially if they're aligned to revenue. And let's get out of just thinking about this from, hey, they're going to care about regulation. My soapbox will end here, Aaron, because again, no one cared about 800-171 until CMMC came in and people said, oh, by the way, you're not going to get your millions and millions of dollars contract. So regulation, yes, it's certainly the stick of it, and it's not the carrot, but
Yeah.
revenue is going to win every single time.
Well, I think one of the first community calls that I think I joined was featuring Greg on it. And I recall you having a Reddit post, Andrew, that you had screenshotted. And it was, I'll call it an MSP, whose customer said, like, I just lost a deal because I couldn't prove to my enterprise customer that I had a level of vendor control. And it was, I'm an SMB. Why should I have to have this? Blah, blah, blah. They're servicing an enterprise. They're servicing a client that expects a different level of security control. And so it's one of those things that triggered the overall focus and conversation all this time. But you're right. It came down to revenue. And that's
the fallacy that you're not regulated also bothers me. Anybody who thinks that is just not paying attention. I guarantee you, somebody, if you mess up, I'm going to use the polite word. If you mess up and have a breach that you lose client data, some regulator is going to reach out to you somewhere and say, "Oh, because they'll want to say, look, we took action, right?" And by the way, regulators are never forward thinking. They're always reacting to the last breach, the last thing that was happening. So if you're skating to the regulators, you're skating on old ice and on thin ice, or I'll use the term, sorry, but you should be using that as just as table stakes. That's really what you should be doing.
Yeah.
I think to add, if I can add 2 things there, is one, like I talk about all the time when people are like, how do you like the money thing and am I regulated and all that? I talk all the time. Like, look, you can take, and I'm not pushing Cynomi, but I am anyway. But when you're doing your assessment, that initial assessment, when you're talking about I'm engaging with that client and you go do that, like, why aren't you adding a security assessment at that time so that you know where the security posture is? And then on the second level, like, and I think I'll make Greg happy about this particular about this statement, is if you're going in and you know they're regulated, like TPRM should be part of your assessment. You need to know
Preach
what
it,
they're
Tim.
doing.
Amen, Tim.
So the other
I'm with
comment I'll
you.
say about that is, as far as the people who are regulated, like, I hear it all the time. It's like these MSPs come to me and they're like going to market and they're like, well, our clients say they can't afford it. And the conversation, I turn back with them and say, that's not the conversation. It's not, can you afford it? It's, how do you budget for it? Right? Because the regulation, the government, the overriding entity is saying you're going to do this. So you're either going to pay to get this in, or you're going to pay a fine if they catch you, right? Because it's, the difference legal and illegal is getting caught, right? Don't tell anybody I said that. But the point being is, if you're not framing it in a way of how do you budget to help those companies get within those frameworks to have the TPRM, then that's the go-to play. You can't go into someone and say, I need $100,000. You go into them and say, look, you've got a project here where we have to get you into this compliancy. Here's how we budget for it over the next 2 to 6 quarters to allow that. So I think the conversation is, the MSP shuts down when the client says, I don't have the money. Having the money is not the conversation. Budgeting for it is the conversation, because you got to do it either way.
Yeah, well said, Tim. Yeah, the capital allocation, again, the capital allocation committee is a big thing. And, again, I'll last thing I'll say here is, again, the unregulated clients, where most of us have, right? Once we get past the regulated clients who quote unquote need the BCISO service, the meaty middle is, and Greg, you and I talked about this. What about your largest contractual customers? And do they have a right to audit? In that right to audit statement might be things like, hey, we can come in and look at how you manage your vendors and the security and how you vet them. So this makes you different than, hey, let's just do a risk assessment. You're doing those things, but we're framing it back to what revenue drives the business. That's what executives CFOs will perk up their ears when contractual obligations are at risk. So,
and use the resiliency term, because it's apt. It should not be divorced from the third party risk discussion, and that usually will also help tap into resiliency budgets and that kind of stuff too. There's ways that you can. You're right. The TPRM is a 4-letter word that sort of just gets bandied around in an acronym that nobody really understands. But if you can parlay that into the business impact, like resiliency and other stuff that you're talking about, Andrew and Tim and others, I think you can find the budget, is what you're saying. Absolutely.
Let's tap into that, Greg, about the strong relationship between business continuity and third-party risk, because they're different sides of the same coin, really, when it comes down to it, isn't it? And how do you kind of approach that, and what recommendations might you have for folks out here to your point about it's really about resilience?
Yeah. So, well, one is make friends with those critical vendors. I don't mean take them out to a beer, but have them part of the discussion for your resiliency. What I will often advise to, and when I've run organizations, we pick a vendor or vendors every year to do a tabletop exercise with, for when that vendor goes down, and we don't pick the small vendor, you pick the vendor that's critical. How are we going to operate when one or both of us are have an impact, an operational impactful issue? And we walk through it. And then hopefully you can actually do some failovers once in a while, right? That's what you really want to focus in on, is focus on those critical vendors, ask them for, and look, if you go to a vendor and say, I know most of us are going to say, well, hey, they don't want to do it. If you go to a vendor and say, you're really important to me, how many of them are going to say, please go away? right? They want, oh, wow, how can I help you, Greg? Is usually what falls out of their mouth at that point. Well, you're important enough to us, and we want to continue that success. So we would like to do a walkthrough of what happens if your or our operation is impacted by an outage on your end. Now they may, well, that will never happen, and we can get past that. But let's pretend it will, and let's walk through how we can both be successful, so that we can continue this relationship. Those are magical words to a vendor. So that stuff will just kind of fall out. The other one is ensure that to your earlier point, contracts have things like right to audit, notification in instance of a breach. I can't believe I still have to teach this one, but I still find customers and a lot of vendors who don't have a notification of breach within every single contract. There's no reason why not to include it. Even your landscaper, you're going to have to go online and schedule when they're going to mow your grass. Well, if they get ransomware, probably their scheduling is offline. It's not critical to your operation, but you'd want to be notified that they've been breached, even at that level, right? So that kind of stuff you need to have in there. And then the right to audit. I'd like to use the term right to assessment, because audit really sets people, even me, when you say audit, I go, oh, I guys immediately scrunch up. But you say, we would like to have, and usually audit is focused in on financial. You can leverage it, and we always do, the right to audit, but it's mostly focused on the financial folks. If you can get into your contract right to perform a security assessment annually, and or should a breach or an event occur, that is magical words, because you can, it's not an audit. And the vendor automatically doesn't get sort of, oh, we just want to come and find out how you're doing your security. That's a different discussion in audit. It just is.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And like we said, to Aaron's point, they're coming, they're going to come. And if you haven't gotten one, or your client says, well, we haven't gotten them yet, say, well, I'm curious, have you looked into any changes with your largest customers? Like that they're critical. When are the contracts coming due? Right? Those types of things. Again, CMMC highlights this.
That's right.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now all of a sudden people care, right, Greg?
Yeah.
Because never before did they have to make sure things were buttoned up, right? To get their revenue. That it doesn't necessarily have to be regulated. It's they're going to get pressure from their largest suppliers and customers. So well said. Well said. Dan put in an interesting comment. I like what he put in. He goes, I always ask if they have, vendor management. Do you ever look at it that way, Greg?
Absolutely. That's a great way to assess how they do nth parties. Right?
Yeah.
And so the fourth party, nth party issue that we come into, where how do you assess whether a vendor is doing the right thing for their critical third parties, your fourth, and so on, right? And it can get really complicated. What you should be doing is asking your vendor, what does your third party risk management program look like, and is it as robust as the one I'm presenting to you? Because if they're doing the needful, then you should be able to sleep relatively comfortable at night. Stuff will still hit the fan, but if they've got their program up and running like yours, then they'll know what to do, and they'll have run through the process and notify you that you're one of their third parties, your fourth parties, now been breached, and here's the process. We walk through it, right? I venture to guess that if you look at most folks, how they do fourth party stuff, nth party, they just ignore it because it becomes an exponential issue. You have 12 vendors with 12 critical vendors. You got 144 vendors that you have to add to a list of vendors you can't already manage anyways, right? So let's not do the difficult work. Have your vendor do the difficult work of managing your fourth parties. Just make sure they're doing the critical steps they need to do.
Yeah, fantastic. That was awesome, Greg. Any closing questions or thoughts from everybody that might have something for Greg before I hand it over to Aaron?
Shouldn't customers be considered third-party risks?
So customers are not considered third parties. Third parties is an Uber term that includes things like vendors, partners. It doesn't have to have money exchange. It could be just, and you don't necessarily have to have a contract, but customers are considered a different entity than third parties. That's a great question, though. It's
It is.
no, it's one that is often asked, right?
Thank
Very good.
you.
Sure.
Aaron, over to you.
All right. So what we wanted to do was two things. We wanted to make it clear and remind everyone from our last week's call. Within our Cynomi partner ecosystem, our Cynomi partners get access to an NFR license. They get to leverage Cynomi. Some use it for demo purposes, some use it for prospecting, but something that is different that we want to introduce and that is available now is all Cynomi partners will get access to TPRM for your own purposes. So, our belief in this is that TPRM starts with you as the vendor. You have work to do in order to demonstrate your capability and your own third-party risk management out to clients as well. And so this is available now. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. I have a slide later. We'll show you. But we wanted to reiterate that while we have as many people on this call as possible to show that off. So that is coming and it's available now if you want to request it from your partner account managers. The second part that we wanted to do was just show it to you live on platform. And so we've got Ricky on the line. He's one of our partner account managers, and he's just going to walk through the platform capability and show it off. So if you have any questions as he's going through that, this is the guy to ask.
Yes. Let me pull this up. If it's too technical, don't ask me, okay?
That beard is too
Yeah.
beautiful for you to be technical.
That's exactly. Let me share.
Gotcha.
Yep. I think
While
we
he's
did
doing
it.
that, I have
Perfect.
shared Greg's LinkedIn information in the chat. So anybody wants to connect with Greg directly, hopefully I didn't just spam his LinkedIn, but hey, we're a community.
All right, let me.
Now, anybody, I was just going to type in there. You guys, if you want to DM me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to spend a half hour with anybody and give you guidance if you need it.
Thank you.
Perfect. And we can see my screen now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys. I will walk us through a little bit of the TPRM module here that we can add on to both licenses, whether that's the Pro or the Core. And I'm going to just start at the sub account level here. You will see once added on, there is the vendor risk on the side, along with the rest of the features that are within the Cynomi platform. So when we start to do the assessments for vendor risk, it's going to look a little bit similar to our risk management and our risk matrix. You will have that heat map for inherent and residual risk. You will also be able to see which vendors you have added in for this sub account that we are monitoring and managing. When we go to add a new vendor, right, I'm going to take you through some of the simple steps to add these ones in. We can go in, do some vendor just names. We will just kind of steal some of this stuff and put it in here. I will put in my info, just random stuff. And email. So we will put in the contact information for the vendor that we are creating this for with any notes that we need to. Once we have it created, we'll see the details and we will also see two assessments. These assessments are going to look very familiar to what we do within Cynomi when we are onboarding a new client. But what we're going to start with is the impact assessment, right? This is going to show how this specific sub account is utilizing the vendor. Now, it will have the yes or no questions, very similar, like I said. One, sensitive information, is it revenue generating? Who is using it within the organization? And then, of course, is there an SLA, right? So we will throw that in there, and once submitted, it is now going to say this is how this partner of yours or client of yours is utilizing the vendor. We go right down to the security assessments. Now, this can be done manually if you want to input this, but we were going to skip right past it because we want to streamline the process. Put some of the work back on the vendor. There are now, with big update that came out, I believe it was Sunday, there are 4 total assessments that we can choose from to send to that vendor contact, right? I'm just going to select a normal send them a general security assessment. We can preview the questions directly from this screen as well. We can complete the assessment ourselves. I just recommend sending it directly to that vendor contact. And when we do that, we type in the information, it gets sent. But however, I'm going to go back to kind of show you what it looks like when we hit complete it myself. So that vendor contact is actually going to be able to receive this and complete it within the Cynomi platform itself. There's not going to be a need to go grab it and then re-enter it in. They can start to go through the assessment. Again, same exact concept as our initial onboarding assessments. They can run through these 8 different chapters, right? Once those are completed, they can, I should back up and say, when they are looking into this and they're going through them, they'll have the ability to enter any notes if they need to explain further why it's only a partial or it's an NA. They can also drag and drop files directly for each individual question. Now, I will just save and continue that later and go back to one that has already been completed. We will just choose this one. So you can see how this was already completed. The impact assessment is done. The security assessment was completed. We have now an inherent and a residual risk indication as well as a vendor rating. Is it going to pass or fail? This is all done by your standards on what you go to consume, a pass or a fail rating. You can also have a little bit of customization as well for impact and likelihood for each inherent and residual risk options, right? Just in case it needs to change. We can also go in and identify what the assessor at the vendor, what their answers were and to which question. So we can do this. We can also download this as a CSV as well if we need to comb through it, whatever it may be, and any flagged questions that came up that were posing a risk. It gives you a deeper insight on what was going on and how it was handled. Let me go back here. With this, we can now see that we have the vendor notes that were all copied directly within this area, as well as any attachments that we might wanted to put into this for just a deeper understanding on how the vendor is being, I'll say, assessed. And we have an ISO certification, there's a SOC 2 certification, anything along those lines. That is how to add in one specific vendor into a sub account. Now, there is a streamlined way that I highly recommend for our partners who are utilizing this for a lot of their sub accounts, all of their sub accounts, etc., which is going to be a shared tenant. So going back to the multi-tenant view that we have for our partners, you'll see a shared vendors tab now. We could go through the exact same process for each individual vendor, for each individual client that we have, or if there is a multiple uh, client that or multiple clients that utilize the same vendors because that's who we use, we go through, or it's a very popular vendor, we can actually create them within the shared vendors, and you will see that it would say managed by the multi-tenant partner. But we would add it the exact same way. You would go through that exact same process. The only thing that kind of changes here is that we can now go in and start to link our sub accounts directly to the vendor, or vice versa, vendor to the sub accounts, instead of having to manually input or send out multiple different questionnaires. So that is time saving, streamlined, very simple. The only thing I will worth mention, or that's kind of worth mentioning, is for these ones, we still want to go into each sub account and complete the impact assessment. That's the one which is the 4-question assessment, so we can identify how they are being or how that vendor is being used within that environment. So that is the very high level overview of what TPRM kind of looks like and how it's being used. And I'll hand it back over to you, Aaron or Tim.
No way, Ricky. You got questions, man. You can't
Yeah,
get away that easy,
I
bro.
can't see the questions.
We'll help you with the questions. I think, Mike, you had a great question that I think Ricky just nailed, which was client adds a vendor. How simple or challenging is it to incorporate in the main tenant? So I think he just demonstrated that.
That was perfect. Thank
I just
you.
wanted to say bleep yeah for the group, just to make sure you were good.
Yeah, we're gonna make that a sticker. Bleep yeah.
That's awesome.
And then the other one was from John Hay.
Yeah, John. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. It was let's see my chat moved. This week from a more mature client, can you customize the questions asked of vendors? So can we customize those questions a bit?
As of today, the customization of questions is not available. However, this is a relatively new module as well. We're continuously updating it, which is shown by now we have 4 different assessments that are in there. That would be great if you want to, as a partner, we have a partner product portal that we can go in and add suggestions into as well.
All right. So I heard several asterisks in Ricky's answer there that to be determined. I know most of our other stuff that you can definitely add some stuff in. So I would not doubt seeing that. And of course, and then now we're getting the Ricky, you're on the hot seat, buddy.
Playing stump the chump over here.
Right? Stump. I like that, right? Because you're about as high as a stump. So is there a field that can be used to capture other information, contract owner details, things of that?
Where we go into each vendor, there are different spots to put in your vendor notes as well as attach specific if there's certifications and stuff. So we do have that possibility. I'll dive into one of the other ones just so we can show as we talk about it. I should probably keep this one up anyways. Just directly down here, here's where we can actually drag and drop, add the notes, and then within the questions themselves, we'd be able to add any attachments or notes as well.
Awesome. And then does the security assessment have an other option so that the supplier might include relevant information, other frameworks they adhere to, such as CE+?
Other option for, I'm going to assume that this was the other option as a different kind of questionnaire to be able to send over. As of today, no.
Okay. And then any plans to request third party to include public IPs where the Cynomi external scanner can bring that report into the TPRM module? That's probably way technical.
Yeah, we're gonna need. I'll have to go talk to obviously product with that one, and we can get some roadmap on what's going on whenever it's released.
Awesome, Daniel. We'll get back to you on that one. Mr. Fleming's coming back to us. Fleeman, sorry. You could have said you could attach the SOWPO MSLA directly. That's absolutely true. Love that. Keep it all in one place, right? In the 4 templates, this is Daniel's asking, in the 4 templates, will we be able to make a question required versus optional?
They all will be required, so it would more be like if you could make that question optional. They would have to complete the assessment for it to be a full completed question. There are options in there that says NA, I don't know, or partially as well for those vendors. For then you can go back and kind of plan out the roadmap or what your risk mitigation plan would look like for those vendors.
Awesome. And then Gail will make yours the last one so we can keep on track with everybody, unless Aaron so chooses differently. There's a question, Ricky. If you add a vendor note for a vendor that is linked to multiple sub-accounts, is that note visible to all those sub-accounts? That could be a concern for confidentiality requirements.
Yeah, I believe that they are only for the specific one. We'll find out just to make sure that that one is there for you. But the vendor notes are only done on the sub-account level. If we do it on the linked ones, I'll check to make sure that those don't go through because I understand what you're saying on that one.
See, look, Ricky, you're saying you don't have technical answers, man. You got all kinds. You're bringing the heat today. You can stop sharing if you want to, by the way.
Sure.
I'm going to jump in and steal a screen for a quick second here, just as we wrap this up. So thank you, Ricky. If you guys enjoyed watching Ricky in the hot seat, he will be back for a TPRM webinar focused exclusively on third-party risk management capabilities. We're hosting that with 2 phenomenal partners. We've got Dennis Boone from /Blue. We've got Carlos Rodriguez from CA2 Security. And they're going to take it to a bit of a different level. Dennis is going to be talking more like workshop style about how he operationalizes TPRM across his team as part of his managed service offering. And Carlos is going to be talking about how he promotes his TPRM service and how he goes to market, talking more about like the marketing angle and the content angle of this offering. So this session is coming out from Cynomi on April 9th. We'll be posting the link to register for this and take advantage of it. I wanted to just close off. If you weren't convinced by Greg, be convinced by these stats in terms of the opportunity of what TPRM presents to you and to your overall service. But you don't have to listen to me talk about it. You can also download our guide. So wanted to leave you with the QR code so that you get the latest market insights and how-tos from Cynomi on TPRM specifically.
Yeah, and I think it's great. Like, look, Greg is really dug into this to a level that, you know, it's just a primary thing for him, right? That's what he does, and he's predicted this for years. You don't write 3 books in a year, right? Well, maybe Greg does, but I certainly can't. But the point being is, this is coming, whether you want it or not, whether your clients are ready for it or not. It doesn't matter what quote unquote readiness you or the clients or whoever's at. It's coming. So with anything else, if you don't start it today, you're 6 months behind the power curve, right? So it's one of those things you guys need to be looking at this, because it really is going to be more important. Greg, final thoughts on that? You want to help drive that one home?
Yeah, again, start small. Start with systemically critical vendors, make a list, get it risk-based, and start figuring out how to figure out what risks are there and how to attack them, just like you would your first party.
That's right. How do you eat an elephant? Anybody know that joke? One bite at a time.
That's right. Well, Greg, thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us. We really appreciate it. And we will be back next Wednesday. Some of us will be at the RSA conference live in San Francisco, giving you the latest insights and trends from there. And we'll have a great discussion. So we'll see you next Wednesday, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.